I feel like ever since I was a kid Crayola pencils have been seen as the gold standard for affordable coloring pencils. But how well do they handle realism? Today I aim to find out. For this test I'll be using a standard pack of 24 Crayola pencils and I'll be drawing YouTube artist Super Rae Dizzle. But before we draw, we swatch. And before we swatch, we sharpen. These did not sharpen easy in my sharp point sharpener. They felt sticky in the sharpener and it caused the sharpening motion to stutter and get clunky and put more pressure on the core of the pencil. It broke the core multiple times. I ended up using this Coom magnesium sharpener for these pencils. It took me a while to be confident enough to get them at full sharpness, and the wood was a little brittle on some of them, but they ended up getting a decent point. Now for swatching. I did a couple of quick comparison colors and a comparison blend. The colors actually look really nice, and the blend test looked a lot closer to the Faber-Castells than the cheap Staedtlers. The saturation was good and the colors mixed well. I was very impressed. Starting with the background to get a feel of the pencils, it's a simple background but has a nice gradient in some places. It gives me a chance to get used to them and see how they feel before moving on to the more important parts of the drawing. Moving on to the hair, and here's where the test really begins. So far these pencils layer nicely. The saturation is good, which allows me to go softer, which makes it easier to blend the colors. Hair can be difficult sometimes. You can work on all sorts of little details, just to step back and realize they are all too prominent. But when that happens I try to cover them a little. This time I'll be using the black pencil to darken it all, and try to limit the obviousness of the details. I wasn't able to darken parts of the hair as much as I wanted, but I was able to make a lot of the little details a lot less prominent. They still just about show up in the drawing but they don't pop out as much. They sort of blend into the image, allowing you to look at the drawing as a whole instead of immediately being distracted by too many little details that aren't supposed to be that obvious. There are a lot of colors in this image that wouldn't usually be there. The photo got a bit pixelated as I enlarged it, and it created little digital flaws that popped up. I usually just decide to draw the images as I see them. If the reference looks okay, then I can make a drawing that looks okay. This top bit of hair was a lot of fun, and really allowed me to see how these pencils blend and layer. I was able to get some really nice tones here, along with some highlights and shadow areas. I'm having trouble getting some of the dark tones as dark as I'd want, but in general these pencils are doing really well. Now I start on the face. I'm going to start with oranges and reds in the hopes I can dial them back a bit later with some peach and light brown colors. I actually have a pack of Crayola skin tone pencils that I want to test out at a later date. But for the time being I wanted to stick to the 24 standard colors pack. And here we have the number one reason why you should keep your erasers clean. These little marks unclean erasers can sometimes leave behind can be very difficult to deal with. I'll come back to this later and try to hide it as a skin detail. She's looking a bit orange at the moment. I'm going to blame this on my limited lack of colors and pretend this doesn't happen somewhat frequently regardless of how many pencils I have or how expensive they might be. Although in my defense the lighter pencils aren't doing a very good job of toning down the orange. Usually with the Faber-Castells or the Derwents I can use paler colors to bring the vividness back down a little bit, but that's not working so well with the Crayolas. Skin tones are hard. It can be really difficult to get the right color balance. But for the last few years I've been focusing a lot on making sure the first color I layer with is nice and vibrant, so that when I layer on top of it with paler colors, the vibrancy of the first color still shines through. As we work on the eyes, this close-up shot really shows how nicely the colors were layering together. The reds and browns were mixing nicely for her eyes, and the purples and oranges mixed with little touches of green and yellow were giving the surrounding area some really nice color and vibrance. Her cheek is another good place to see just how well these colors start to blend. The saturation I got on the tip of her nose really stands out. And with a bit of burnishing they smooth out really nicely too. I was really pleased when I saw this pack had a white pencil. White pencils can be really useful for burnishing and for lightening tones, but this one doesn't feel as useful. It didn't lighten the tones much, but it was decent at burnishing once I got a sharper point on it. The lighter colors generally are not lightening up the tones in the same way that Faber-Castells do. I'm feeling a little limited, but all in all these feel really good to use. Bearing in mind the Crayolas aren't that much more expensive than the Staedtlers, the jump up in quality feels significant. It's interesting that at this stage of her face the orange tones that previously looked too bright and saturated now seem quite accurate, and it's the rest of the face that's looking too pale. It's not perfect, but all in all I think the tones are looking pretty good. I think context is a big thing to think about as well. I'm currently judging how the skin tones look next to the white of the paper, but by the end of the drawing that white part of the paper will have the darker red tones of her hair, which will make her skin tones look different in comparison. This has happened in lots of my drawings and it can mess with my brain sometimes. I finish up her face tones by smoothing out the colors and making sure everything matches up nicely. Leaving her teeth mostly blank because I hate drawing teeth and I usually try to do as little work on them as possible. So long as it doesn't take away from the finished drawing, I'm happy. By this point I'd managed to get the pencils sharper. The wood's a little brittle on some of them. They don't sharpen quite as cleanly as the Faber-Castells. But it's really not that bad and they're definitely not the worst I've seen. She still looks a bit sunburned. And in fairness it's hard to know if that's because of the pencil quality, the limited colors, or if it's just me making a mistake with my color choices. If I had to guess I'd say I could have done better, but the limited colors made it tricky. As I come to the end of this drawing I can say these pencils did really well. They blended nicely, have a good range of colors, and have good saturation. This was a fun drawing to do. I look forward to trying out other art supplies of different prices so I can figure out where everything stands based on a balance of quality and price. But so far these are very high up. The rest of the hair falls into place without any real issues. I don't seem to have quite the right colors to recreate the exact color of her hair, which is annoying cause it's a big part of the image. But I think I got close enough. And there we have it. Realism done with Crayola pencils. Like I said earlier, Crayola really seemed to be the go-to option for affordable coloring pencils, so I was expecting and hoping for good things from them, and I really wasn't disappointed. They did a great job, and they cost me less than £5. The quality you get for the price is really impressive, and I look forward to testing them out more and comparing them with other pencils at a later date, as well as trying out the skin tone pack of colors. But what do you think? Let me know down below, and remember to like and subscribe if you found this video helpful.